Words West, Voices of Young Pioneers, Part 2. In each newly formed wagon train, the men and older boys, like a boy named Edwin, would help to elect a captain or a wagon train master, as he was also called. They voted on all the trail rules. Edward Lennox's father was a captain of their wagon train in 1843. It wasn't an easy job, recalled Samuel Tetherow, whose father led a train from Missouri to Oregon 2 years later. These were his words in his journal. My dad was a pretty good man. He was a good captain and popular as well. But if you think it's any snap to run a wagon train of 66 wagons, with every man in the train having a different idea of the best thing to do, all I can say is that someday you ought to try it. The decisions that a captain made were the law of the land. Each captain had to decide which route to take, when to rest, when to leave, where to stop, for how long, who stood guard, and whether or not the wagon train would move on Sunday. The captain picked each campsite, taking into consideration the amount of wood, water, and grass available. He also might decide to exclude families who had slaves. Many migrating families did not want to worry about the slavery issue in their new western home. Many wagon trains hired scouts to lead them west. They were paid anywhere from $1 to $4 a day. In the early days along the trail, there were no bridges over streams and rivers. To cross the Missouri River, wagons were rolled onto flatboats made of logs, powered by huge oars. An oarsman stood up and used both arms to control the oars. Everyone and everything might get soaked. The Missouri was only the first of many a river and stream crossings during the journey. 9-year-old Catherine Sager wrote about crossing the Missouri on a ferry with her family's wagon. She and her brothers and sisters began to cry in fear of the river that came rushing up and seemed as though it would just swallow us up. Sarah Ide rode her horse side saddle with her father and the hired help and coaxed 28 oxen and 165 cattle into the Missouri River. Men and teenage boys prodded the rest of the animals until they swam across the river. Then they gathered up the scattered stock on the other side. Thomas Chambers, who was 20 when his family started for Oregon, wrote about the first, last, and only time I cried while crossing the plains. He had accidentally lost some of the family's flour when a bag fell out of the wagon and his raft into the Missouri River. He wrote saying, "I thought my family would starve." In May and June, most immigrants followed a trail over grass-covered lands. Everyone followed the same wagon ruts, or holes in the ground left by the wheels, and it was easy going. On a good day of 12 hours of travel, they went about 15 to 20 miles. The pioneers knew it would not be so easy once they got to the desert and the mountains. During this part of the trip, a large wagon company might divide and then divide again, because it was hard to make headway in such large groups. One train going west in 1845 had 480 wagons. Eventually, they broke into groups of about 20 each. Besides rivers, there were dozens of creeks and damp stream beds to ford. No one wanted a wagon to get stuck in the mud or break an axle. Sometimes the pioneers cut trees and brush to throw into the streams or muddy ravines so that animals and wagons could pass over them. That might take 3 to 4 hours or longer. Once crossing the rivers, the wagon would stop for an hour or two at afternoon. A family might spread out a waterproof sheet and sit on it or use boxes for chairs. Marion Russell, whose mother found a job as a cook for a military train going to Santa Fe, recalled eating cold lunches like leftover biscuits dipped in molasses. They ate with tin plates and cups that would not break. After a long, hard day on the trail, in the late afternoon sun when it got warm, everyone stopped, ate, and then had time to rest. Marion crawled into the back of the wagon to play with her doll or sleep on a pile of blankets. I can still see the tired, sweaty mules rolling over and over in the grass, delighted to be free of pulling the heavy wagons. I can see the tired drivers lying under the shade of wagons, their hats covering their faces as they slept. After the noon rest, the train would go on. Will, Marion's older brother, walked with the driver next to the mules. Marion sat on the board seat at the front of the wagon beside her mother. She learned how to jump off the lumbering wagon as it rolled slowly onward. Except for the sick or the babies and a few pioneers who rode saddle horses, nearly everybody walked, all or part of the day, onto the side of the wagon because they would add too much weight for the animals to pull easily. 6-year-old Billy Walker told an adult, "I'm a great hand for walking. I walked all day yesterday, last night, and when we camped here on the hill, I said I wasn't tired, and I wasn't." Each night the captain, with the help of a scout, found a place to stop. The wagons would form a corral to protect the group from Indians and wild animals. The tongue of one wagon was chained to the wheel of another, usually forming a circle or an oblong shape.